Welcome to the Perrysburg Podcast, episode 71. I am your host and Perrysburg resident, Kim Newlove. This is an informational podcast for prospective, new, and current Perrysburg, Ohio residents. We talk about what's in Perrysburg and why people like to live here. Our website is perrysburgpodcast.com. We are talking about crossing the Perrysburg-Maumee Bridge today, specifically from Perrysburg to Maumee. Please know that I come in peace. I am not here to throw shade on anyone, Perrysburg or Maumee. I know that current Perrysburg residents will be listening to this episode, but I actually recorded it to serve the brand new residents of Perrysburg and the prospective Perrysburg residents who may be listening and are not familiar with the Perrysburg-Maumee area yet. A few years ago, the city of Maumee changed their traffic pattern into historic Uptown Maumee, immediately north of the Perrysburg-Maumee Bridge. It came at a time when I-475 between Perrysburg and Maumee was also under construction, as was the Anthony Wayne Trail, also known as US 24. 3 major construction projects at the same time caused a huge change in our ability as Perrysburg residents to quickly and easily travel to and through historic Uptown Maumee. Many Perrysburg residents felt frustrated, and some still do, and I don't blame them. I've been frustrated too. Getting over the bridge into historic Uptown Maumee at busy times takes extra time. But I love Maumee for so many reasons. This episode comes out the day after Thanksgiving, when Maumee's holiday lights will be up. They're so pretty. I love the holiday lights. And I appreciate so many other things about Maumee, not just the lights, the people, the places, the things. One of the people I enjoy knowing is Margot Puffenberger, who is my graphic designer. She created the artwork for the Perrysburg podcast and my business, The Pharmacist's Voice. Other things that I love about Maumee are that they host Acoustics for Autism every year, and that is a fundraiser that helps individuals with autism and their families. And I have a son with autism. I appreciate Maumee for what they do. One of the other things I enjoy about Maumee is my favorite chocolate shop, the Maumee Valley Chocolate and Candy Shop. My younger son, Derek, used to love to run across the Perrysburg-Maumee Bridge for Perrysburg High School's cross-country team. They would run from Fort Megg's historic battlefield across the bridge, through the towpath, and into Sidecut Park. So many good memories of him running there. And I personally love riding my bike from my house on the west side, across the bridge, down the towpath, to Sidecut, and even all the way up to Fallen Timbers Battlefield Park. One of the things I've talked about on this show is that I like to stop on the bridge and look down at the water during the walleye run. I love that bird's eye view of all the fishermen and women and children lining up to fish. It's like a scene from 100 years ago. For so many reasons, I love Maumee. And I felt really conflicted reconciling my own frustration as a motorist with my love for the people, places, and things in Maumee. So what's a girl to do? Create a podcast episode about it, of course. So instead of jumping all over Maumee's case, I sought to understand what was going on and pass that information along to my audience, especially those of you who are new here or haven't even moved here yet and never knew Maumee any other way. I'm not trying to throw shade on either side of the river, Perrysburg or Maumee. The purpose of this podcast episode is to find out why historic Uptown Maumee changed their traffic pattern, if the change accomplished their goal, and best practices for driving through historic Uptown Maumee and accessing businesses during busy times, one of those businesses being the school at the corner of Broadway and Conant. I got a lot of answers, and I hope that by listening, you feel like you have gotten the answers too. How did I get my answers? You're probably wondering. I reached out to the city council in Maumee to find the right person to answer my questions. Thank you to the City of Maumee Council for connecting me to Patrick Burtch. He is my guest today. He's going to introduce himself at the top of the interview. Without further delay, here is my conversation with Patrick Burtch. For any Perrysburg residents or future Perrysburg residents who may not know who you are, could you please introduce yourself?
Patrick Burtch. I am the City Administrator of Maumee, but I'm also the Public Safety Director and the Director of Public Service.
Thanks for that introduction. Now, as we get started, we're going to be talking about the Perrysburg-Maumee Bridge, and there was a change a couple years ago. We went from 2 lanes into Maumee from Perrysburg down to 1. So I want to ask, what did you hope to accomplish by going from 2 lanes to 1?
The intention was in the road diet, which started in 2020 as a temporary basis. We ran it for about 7 months. At the beginning of COVID and into COVID, the council decided that they wanted to road diet it because over the years they had kept widening the street to the point where they had actually inconvenienced their own residents so well as they eliminated left-hand turns into neighborhoods because they were trying to move traffic faster than they could. What happened is that they induced demand and traffic went up. It just kept going up. So this is a way to say, all right, enough is enough. At some point, we went to an engineering firm, did a study. The study wasn't a signed document, right? We worked and tweaked as we went because during that process, we don't have the ability to get level of service calculations on where you've got blocks that are only 300 or 400 feet apart with traffic signal stops, right? So our intention is to reduce the amount of semi-traffic going through Uptown Maumee, even if it meant that we kept the traffic the same, but they were cars because they start and stop quicker, where a semi does not do that and backs up traffic more often, and return our left turn ability.
I appreciate the clarification. I had never heard the term road diet. So thank you for explaining that.
And we got it from the National Traffic Safety Board and the U.S. Department of Transportation did a huge study on this about communities across the nation have started to road diet to try to make, and then when you neck in the subdivision or the intersection so that pedestrians are safer in uptown areas, even if they carry 20,000 plus cars a day.
That comment you just made about the safety for the pedestrians, I heard that was a big motivation for this project. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would agree with that. As you know, traveling north on Conant, the cars traveled literally 12 inches off the curb against the east side of the road. And people felt unsafe. It felt unsafe. Anybody who'd walked uptown Maumee know that traffic would travel easily at 50 to 55 miles an hour through uptown. And that especially on that side of the walk, I would take them. And one time I was actually walking on a Sunday afternoon, a pretty busy day. This was in early 2020. It was a warm spring day. And there was a couple in front of me and this other council person. And we got to Wayne Street and they were both walking south toward Perrysburg. On Conant, on the east side of the road. And I said, watch where these people cross. So I said, stop right here. We stopped about 40 feet back and they had a baby carriage. And because the way we had our intersections, we had handicap or ADA drops that were at the tip of the radius, which put the crossing on the travel lane, next to the travel lane, which was traveling very quickly because there was no parking. And there were no necked-in intersections. And what this couple did is that there were cars stacked traveling west on Wayne at a stoplight, and they actually went over the curb, not on the drop, behind the stop bar in front of the car, and crossed there because it took them 10 feet away from the traveling lane. That's very telling. And when we did this, we did a kind of a road diet even on US 24 that ODOT allowed us to do. Because of those kind of situations. So I think it convinced council that if we were going to try to provide safety uptown for all users, both bicyclists and pedestrians who are walking, especially if they're walking with children in a baby carriage, that we really need to make sure or a stroller that we need to make sure. Baby carriage seems so 1970, doesn't it? Sorry about that. It's actually a stroller.
I was born in the 70s. It's all right, Patrick.
I think I was in a baby carriage probably. But I think the big point here is to make sure that people feel safe operating within our business district, which is, I think, incredible that is actually happening. We don't have any vacancies that we know of in our uptown. We did when this started. Quite frankly, what we see now is far less semi-traffic than we've ever seen, but we have as many vehicle trips, and they're in cars. The AI controlling system that runs these signals has not been installed yet. In fact, it just shipped Monday. So we haven't even installed the new signaling. You'll still see traffic backup sometimes because Broadway or Wayne will turn red when everything else is green. It's an old antiquated system that operates much like an old irrigation system with, with mechanical dials and programming. So sometimes we have to actually run them manually.
New signals are coming. That's exciting. When do you expect those to be installed? And what's it going to be like once they're installed?
Hopefully this fall. Back before we did this, and for many, many years, Conant was at the mercy of what the trail did. It was controlled in and out of Toledo. So if you at 50 miles an hour on the trail, if you were hitting, you could hit every green light and make it without stopping to downtown Toledo from Maumee, or even from 475. And then in the evening, you'd go the opposite way out of town, but you get stopped at light signals all the time. So right now, the new system is designed so that they operate together. So Conant isn't stopped automatically. That makes no sense. Even when if there are no vehicles traveling there aren't enough cars stacked on Anti-Lane Trail, Conant will not turn red. It'll keep green until it clears its traffic. Those are the kind of things we knew would happen, and we knew it would take 3 years to get here. And here we are. We're waiting for Edison in some cases to get us power for certain things, but we're close to the end.
Change takes time.
A lot of time.
Yes, AI is changing the world. And when you talk about these signals making a positive impact on traffic, I am very hopeful that we will all see that just as soon as they can get installed and, hooked up, like you said, with Toledo Edison. I've got to ask you, though, quick question about motorcycles. So I'm a motorcyclist.
Oh, my.
Okay, they're very good. Patrick, have you ever been the only vehicle at a stoplight and your bike is not heavy enough to actuate the signal? Has that ever happened to you?
It does. Pavement actuators is not how the system runs. It runs on cameras.
That'll help us, right, Patrick?
It will. It will. That's what happens on the trail. You don't saw cut the pavement anymore and do those actuators in the pavement. That doesn't happen anymore.
I'm happy to hear that Maumee's signals will be kind to the motorcycles. That's great. What a bonus. Awesome. Well, you already talked about safety increasing by having the road diet, and you've got better pedestrian safety. So let's go to my second question here. Do you feel like you accomplished the goal that you wanted to accomplish by changing the bridge traffic from, 2 lanes down to 1 and then keeping 1 lane through town?
It's really a misnomer to say it's 1 lane. It's really 3 because it assumes that the middle turn lane doesn't act, right? The middle turn lane most of the time acts. Our emergency vehicles get through easier than they did on 4 lanes because on 4 lanes, there are cars jockeying back and forth to get around another vehicle. And that's the purpose of going to a 3-lane cross section from a 4 lane with 2 lanes either way, but not a turn signal. When somebody tries to turn, it backs up traffic and people are maneuvering around it. Maumee years ago decided, hey, let's eliminate left turns so people can move faster. But I'm not sure. It's unfortunate, but I think at some point, Maumee's been a victim of its own design, right? We have a tendency to think that we're trying to encourage people to get through town when really you're trying to encourage people to stay, right? I mean, you want people to get through town, but you're not trying to do something that actually harms the businesses that are operating there to begin with. So that's what we find. And I want to make pretty clear that, back in 1986, when they were thinking about doing that bridge, they did a study. It was Temacog and Lucas County. And quite frankly, back then they did a lot of trend line analysis. Back in 1986, I think in 1986, I was just graduating my bachelor's degree, and they did a study. In fact, I have it beside me. They projected that in 2010, or first of all, in 1986, they did a study, and it was 26,500 trips a day were going across that bridge on Conant and Maumee. In 2010, they extrapolated that there would be 37,700 cars a day. And in 2017, they said there would be 57,000 cars a day on Conant Street. Now, I asked some engineers that did our traffic stuff, what would it take to get to 57,000 cars? Could you even handle that? And they said, nope, you'd have to tear down a row of buildings. You'd have to widen the bridge to 6 lanes, because 57,000 cars a day is kind of what happened on 475 back then. It never happened. In fact, when we did our study originally, we started doing traffic counts before COVID. We were less than 26,500 cars a day. We were at about 25,800. Fast forward decades and decades and decades, the extra traffic never materialized because the bridge was built to 4 lanes and we took ours to 4 lanes, and it never increased. Traffic never increased. In fact, it decreased. In fact, we're seeing that today about that amount of traffic. It's just not as many semis. In fact, during the day, we had a lot of semis because I'll tell you, this was very difficult because it was a choice to get it done as fast as we could, because we didn't want 20A and the Antwerp Trail and Conant to happen consecutively, because that means for 10 years, you'd be constantly trying to get through here. It'd be terrible. So we tried to make sure they happened all at the same time. But what the risk with that is that when they did 475, guess where all the semis went? Right uptown Maumee and through Perrysburg, right up through that divergent diamond. And I think people in Perrysburg saw that complication, and so did we. But once they opened up the lanes on 475, I can sit here, my office window looks right over Conant at Dudley, and rarely do I see semis unless they have some kind of other reason to be here. We rarely see a semi on Conant Street. It was meant to say, if you're a semi, there's an expressway that is better used. In fact, it's really strange. I ran in yesterday. I was speaking, I spoke at the State Forestry Conference, because obviously trees are an issue too, right? So I spoke yesterday at the State Forestry Conference, and a gentleman came up to me who used to be a UPS driver. And he said, I used to go through there. I couldn't understand why you did it. And until I heard you speak today about the things I'm telling you today, he never understood why we did it. And now thinks, I get it. I get why you did this. I get why the city council decided to road diet this, because you're right. I just went out in the expressway when I was a UPS driver. I came through in the morning, never had a problem, but I never took the semi downtown when I could have just gone the expressway to go in the same spot. And he seemed very supportive now when he actually heard the explanation. Many people react when they haven't heard an explanation of what we were trying to accomplish. And I don't know anybody, even in Perrysburg, I've never met anybody who says, you know what? I'm on Perrysburg. I'm in Front Street, or I'm downtown Perrysburg. I never heard anybody say, I'd really love it if more semis would use downtown Perrysburg. Have you ever heard that? I haven't.
No.
I've ever been. And even if you went to Ann Arbor, Michigan, is, downtown Main Street, where all those 37 restaurants are, is a lot of traffic. Sometimes they have lots of backups in the evenings, but that's the 94 bypass. And I don't know if any restaurant owner would say, hey, you know what I'd like you to do? Take all the parking off the street and get traffic through there faster. I bet none of them would say that was a good idea. And really the Strong Towns principles support this wholly. The Department of Transportation, this is something they support. They do it in many communities in Ohio. You'll notice that Westerville is the same way. There's a lot of really interesting communities that do this across the nation. So we're first and foremost is pedestrian safety. When I first was interviewed here, I was questioning, because I grew up in Waterville, been around Maumee a long time. And I noticed that when I came here, they asked me, what would you do with North Conant? What would you do with Conant? What we're a little stagnant here. I said, well, you've got 2 major state highways. One's a U.S. highway, one's a state. And it crushes your city into 4 components, and it separates them, wholly separates them. Nobody felt safe crossing at Gibbs Street. And when we road dieted US 24, Gibbs Street, they had a swing lane going north that none of our traffic engineers could understand why it existed, because when you eliminated it in the models, it didn't make a darn bit of difference. So having a swing lane there that went across traffic and traffic never stopped when kids were trying to cross never helped. So we actually reduced that intersection width almost 20 feet. and eliminated that swing lane. Swing lanes are really never a good idea when you have a lot of pedestrians crossing because traffic never stops. I like roundabouts, but I don't like roundabouts where there's heavy pedestrian traffic because traffic never stops. And that's me from a layperson's perspective, but I can tell you there's a lot of traffic engineers who feel the same way.
When you say swing lane,
Swing lane is a right turn lane that swings and doesn't stop. It's a right turn lane, but it doesn't stop. It actually goes and starts veering off on a V and actually merges into the lane that it's turning right onto. They have those in many places. Out at the mall, one of the things that ODOT pointed out to us when they were doing this Vision Zero initiative, which is trying to initiative for zero traffic deaths. One of the intersections where we have a lot of accidents is at the mall, Fallen Timbers and Russell Road, which is Jerome extended. And you'll notice that signal intersection, if you're ever out there sometime, you'll notice that we have swing lanes. They avoid the signal and they just keep going. And it becomes a problem. And it's one of our highest traffic accident counts, even though we don't have a lot of traffic out there. Per vehicle, it's got one of the highest traffic accident counts in the city. So we try to eliminate those whenever we can.
thank you for explaining that. I wasn't sure what a swing lane was, but now I get it, especially when you use that example over by Fallen Timbers Mall, because when I get off of the highway and I'm headed to the Fallen Timbers Battlefield Park out there on I believe it's North Jerome Road,
Yes.
then yeah, I have to take one of those to get to the park.
And you never stop. You just swing right into it. You look left to see you're not hitting anybody, but you are continually moving. You don't have to stop at a light.
And you're saying that's bad, correct?
That's bad.
Okay.
And we don't have enough traffic to warrant something like that. I mean, it wouldn't even, today, ODOT tells us that intersection wouldn't even warrant a signal. So, I mean, there's reasons for why they do. We received a grant for road dieting from ODOT on Dussel Street. They said we could apply for grants all the way from the expressway all the way to the rec center at Key. But we're actually doing a project that they're going to do for us. We got a grant that goes from Reynolds Road to Key. And we're narrowing it down and putting a large island in the middle. It's a forested island. And then putting a path aside from that, a 12-foot Astro path, a bike path, and narrowing the drive lanes to get people to slow down. The idea is if you've got a speeding problem and it's continual and you try to enforce and it still doesn't work, you got a design problem. The street is designed improperly for the traffic flow.
Okay. We shifted our focus kind of away from the bridge and we went to the streets of Maumee. Sorry if I kind of led you to that conversation, but thank you for sharing some new terminology for me and informing me about some intersections that I didn't know were a problem. We had started this little sidebar by talking about, have you accomplished what you want to? And what I heard you say is that the emergency vehicles now have more access to a through lane by using the left turn lanes, correct?
Yes, correct.
And pedestrian safety has improved.
Immensely.
All right. You have a decrease in semi-traffic, which was definitely wanted, and a decrease in traffic accidents. Is that correct?
Correct.
Those sound like great outcomes. Is there anything else that you would like to share about how the bridge going from 2 lanes down to 1 lanes has been a good thing for Maumee?
Well, the bridge is still 4 lanes. It's not to get over the bridge that it road diets down at Broadway.
Yeah, that's what I'm referring to. I'm sorry.
That's all right. So we give some kind of stacking. So people are starting to get used to it. And you'll notice from Perrysburg, like last night, I came home at about 4:30. It was heavy traffic. I was stopped just off the bridge on the first light, and it cleared. It literally cleared within a minute and a half. I got all the way back to City Hall. So I think people are the massive traffic backups they were thinking about were happening when 475 was under construction, and a lot of those trucks were being bypassed uptown. I challenge people to look back into 2019 and Google. You can go into Google Earth, and you can see traffic backed up on Conant 2019 before I even came here. And you had massive backups on Broadway to the bridge on Conant based on a 4-lane traffic section, worse than you have it now. In fact, we think we have traffic backups. Any kind of traffic backup happens about 2.5 hours in a 24-hour period. Before this happened, we had about 7 hours of backup like that on a 4-lane cross section. So we think it even gets better with the signaling because it reads people that need to cross, pedestrians, and it also reads the amount of traffic stacked to the light. So, and it adjusts based on that. And all the trees we plant uptown and on Conant and that small island was meant for pedestrian safety as well, because the speed would increase measurably once you got going toward Perrysburg. And we're having a little bit of problem once you get past the island, which council approved an extension of that island. I don't know when that'll happen, if it's this fall yet, but it's to keep people from, going from 35 miles an hour to flooring it and hitting 60 by the time they hit the bridge. That's dangerous. So the idea was to make sure that when we provided as many street trees as we could and much landscaping as we could, it creates a vertical edge friction. I mean, remember that, and I think even in the Strong Council books, Charles Marone talks about this. The idea is that motorists will travel as fast as they feel safe doing so. If you're on an expressway and you got clear cut all the way back to 100 yards and you think that you can somehow have a good result if you're going 80 miles an hour and you start losing control of your car, but somehow you're not going to die. But if you're in a town where the streets are narrower and the curbs, you can see the curbs and you can see street lights and you can see street tree canopy, that vertical edge friction makes people feel like they need to slow down because they feel unsafe going any faster. That's what provides the pedestrian safety. And then also, there's a concept that HUD has come up with, and it's taught in the police academies, is that safety through environmental design, or crime reduction through environmental design, which means that people feel hemmed into a space, travel less fast. You can't get away after you committed a crime as fast because you don't feel like it's safe to do that, even if you're somebody who's violated the law. So all of those things put together is what we're trying to accomplish here. Essentially, that's what Divergent Diamonds did too.
Safety is part of your role. So I get how you're looking out for all these safety aspects. So thank you for explaining that. I know that people just want to get through town quickly, and I don't blame them. People from Perrysburg see that as a way to get to someplace in historic Uptown Maumee there, or a way to get through on their way to something that's just north of Maumee or in a different part of Maumee. So I get it. I get it. My empathy skills are in place. But at the same time, I wanted to make sure that you had the opportunity to talk about why you did what you did, and if you feel like you accomplished that. It feels to me like through this conversation that I have satisfied my curiosity. So at this point, I still need to serve my audience and people from Perrysburg who are looking to move here, or it's day one or their first 12 months here, and they have not really had much experience with the Perrysburg-Maumee Bridge. What advice do you have for them about getting into Maumee quickly and easily, or getting north of Maumee, the historic downtown Maumee there?
I think we perceive a problem that has very spurious result, right? And how we think about things. Basically 22 hours a day, you can travel this distance and you aren't stopped at all, or it's very, very quick, quicker than it was before we did the road done. 2 hours a day, and that is typically on some afternoons during rush hour and some mornings, although less mornings than there were before, if people simply adjusted drive times by 10 minutes, and when they left to go somewhere, it makes a huge difference. And we've witnessed it the entire time we've sat here and watched the street. And through the construction and everything else, our construction workers, everybody understands that people making slightly different decisions doesn't hamper them in any way. And quite frankly, it's kind of interesting where some people would go and they go to Boston or they go to Chicago and they see these streets where you have somebody parked and they'll have 20,000 cars a day on it, and you have to actually pull over to let somebody pass, and they think that's acceptable. But when you have an uptown like Maumee or even Perrysburg, the idea is that, are we really inconveniencing people that much? Because if truly people believe that it's the city's responsibility, Maumee's responsibility to make sure people from anywhere else can get through our community as fast as they can, we were doing that for a long time. It was called building an expressway right through your downtown, and eventually would have killed our uptown. I could probably say that if 20 didn't exist and you had to go down Front Street and you had to go down Uptown Perrysburg to get all the way out to the expressway, where if you didn't have a divergent diamond, there was no expressway there, I'm pretty sure that there aren't many people that live on those streets in Perrysburg would think, you know what, go back to 4 lanes because we really need to get traffic through here. You know what I'm saying? I don't mean to be flip. People forget how that was. I mean, back when I was in high school, Dussel Drive was a stone road and there was nothing. It stopped. It didn't even go over the expressway. And in fact, when I was in high school, that was in the late 70s, and we have pictures where Ford Street was all the way to Illinois was actually Salisbury Road. It was just a dirt road past the quarry there. So things change over time and we soon forget what it was like. So we get kind of spoiled by the fact that we can go through somewhere because our businesses are flourishing. We created 286 on-street parking spaces uptown, including those on Conant. And we have a lot of business activity here. I get that people don't think I went through the Divergent Diamond yesterday and it took me longer to get through Perrysburg's Divergent Diamond at 475 than it took me to get home during rush hour from the bridge to the office. So, and it was backed up traffic. When I went there in the morning, when I went down to Bluffton to speak in the morning at 8:00, there was a backup past the Dunkin' Donuts to get on the Divergent Diamond. And then when I came home, it was a backup. So we have those everywhere. And I know that they're planning, I think ODOT is planning to rebuild some of the stuff at the Divergent Diamond already because of issues they're having. I saw that in a meeting, but like I said, our point is to try to make sure everybody feels comfortable. We're trying to create experience, not just a road. We're trying to create a space that people like to congregate, where all peoples of every population, either economically marginalized or racially marginalized, or anybody who needs to operate within our system and our community, need to do it, feeling safe doing so. And that's really what we're trying to do, including Perrysburg residents when they come here.
Thank you. I appreciate the history lesson. I was just a wee little one when that stuff was happening that you're talking about. I think you said Dussel Drive was a stone road or something.
Yes.
Yep. I don't remember those days, but I was, on the planet at the time. It's kind of interesting to hear the history. And for anyone listening to this who's looking to move here or is brand new here, they don't know what it was like back in 2019 or, just prior to the bridge being, the same as what it is. Okay, the bridge isn't really affected. It's just the entrance into historic downtown Maumee there, or uptown, whatever you want to call it. They don't know because they haven't been here, or they're not here yet. So the purpose of this episode is really to provide information, and providing information is what you're trying to do by saying, hey, give yourself 10 extra minutes at these busy times. Now let's talk about when are the busy times, Patrick?
Well, I don't think they need 10 extra minutes. I think if they adjust their time they travel, they don't need 10 extra minutes. There's no extra time at all. It happens for about 20 minutes on some mornings. We see it on Thursday morning. We see a problem on Friday evenings, about 4:30 to 4:45. And then we see it about 5:15 for about 10 minutes. We see it sometimes at 8:00 in the morning on a Monday. But we used to have this every single night at rush hour. It was backed up on Conant. In fact, I remember it. I remember it well. So it's really important to recognize that we actually have less traffic on Conant than we did in 1986, before all that widening happened. And I think people forget that.
Thank you for the history lesson. That's a good reminder. When you were talking about those busy times, Monday mornings and Thursday mornings and, Friday afternoons and stuff like that, I have been thinking about kids, and school times, because there is still Union Elementary School that's used for the special needs preschool, I believe, that Perrysburg and Maumee share.
Yes.
So that may be a busy time, and that's right there at the corner of Broadway and Conant. And after school, pick up or going to after school activities. Would you like to talk about that as well?
Sure. On Broadway, we actually created 41 on-street parking spaces that we didn't have before on East Broadway. So when people come from Perrysburg, pick their children, they can actually pull over without having to cross a busy, because in 2019, even before Perrysburg was doing it, we had school letting out from St. Joe's, and people were parking all the way across Conant and trying to get across Conant at very precarious times at 3:30 in the afternoon. And I know that people would rather have a left turn signal on Broadway But Broadway's was never built to take that kind of traffic. And with the expansion of St. Joe's, which has been a very successful expansion, and also the use by Perrysburg and the busyness that happens at the Union, we want to make sure that the mothers and fathers who are picking up their children are safe when they do that. What's happening is they would used to pull in there and they would park in the street and people would try to get around and they would back up traffic out of Conant. That doesn't happen anymore. So our issue is trying to make sure that we're trying to make our children as safe as possible, even the children of Perrysburg for sure, and make sure that they feel safe in being here. You know, even the city around the school there, we actually paid for about 3/4 of the fence that separates that play yard. The city actually pays for it to make sure and widen the sidewalks so when parents dropped off and a car hit that curb, that there were still 6 or 7 feet that you could walk in front of it, because we never had angle parking there before. We simply had a parallel space that was used for buses. So we're finding that the buses using the back on Harrison and having parents pick up on Broadway has been a huge success. Now, I understand the frustration because you want to get in and get out, you're picking up your child, but we want to recognize that the safety of school children is utmost in our minds, even before the convenience of motorists. So we take that very seriously here in Maumee. I know that they do in Perrysburg as well.
Safety is important. I agree.
I believe that when even they had the roundabout discussion, I think the city council and their administrator in Perrysburg did a great job of taking that input and recognizing that a roundabout may not be the thing to do there at that intersection at 20. I think we all do things in a way we think best for our residents and for the people that surround us. At some point, we have to recognize that safety should never be measured against convenience. Safety is always tantamount. If we are inconvenienced because we're trying to provide safety, that's just how it is, unfortunately. Or fortunately, in my opinion.
Safety is important. We've said it before. And I understand that's part of your job. That's one of the reasons I contacted you, because this is part of your job. Now, you talked about adjusting the time that you travel by 10 minutes. For parents who absolutely just have to drop off and pick up when they do, what advice do you have for them?
A parent getting a little bit early and parking also provides them an opportunity to be sitting waiting for the child to come out. And I get that some parents can't do that, but it also takes into account it's not just the parents. There's a driver trying to move through Maumee in some case. Certainly a semi-driver, if you could find a different route during those busy times, please do so. If it's anybody else other than a parent coming from Perrysburg, maybe they should consider, since don't have a time deadline to pick up a child at Union School, maybe they should consider a 5-minute difference or a 10-minute difference in when they travel through, or find an alternative route if they think that, because quite frankly, I've never sat, even during construction, I've never sat on that bridge. It took me from the bridge or from halfway through the bridge to Conant Street is never taken me more than 11 minutes at the worst backups. I've not seen that now, and none of my council members. In fact, our staff, we had 25 stopwatches that we gave to staff and employees that lived in Perrysburg. And for a couple of years, they used those stopwatches just to see how long it took them to get from the intersection at 20 in Perrysburg to get to City Hall and back. And those numbers were astoundingly less than people were saying they were. So I get that embellishing how long it takes me because you're frustrated. It happens. I mean, I'm guilty of that too. I sat in traffic thinking, I remember going home and telling my wife, I said, on Monroe Street in Toledo, I waited for 20 minutes at this light when really I probably sat 4. Right? So that happens sometimes. I get that.
We're emotional creatures, humans.
I understand.
Can't help it.
You have to recognize that.
Patrick, I know that there are some apps out there, smartphone apps that people can use to help understand with traffic how long it's going to take them to get from point A to point B. Just want to ask you real quick, do you happen to have any experience with any of them?
Yeah, Waze. Waze is an excellent app. It does a very good job. And actually, it takes into account input from pedestrians and from people in vehicles. It's an app on your phone. And if you see an accident on Conant, you can actually put it in and it'll put it out there for everybody. Well, police officers may not like it because it tells you where they are too. But I think Waze does a fantastic job of warning you of delays places. I don't know if you've ever used it before, but I use it going down south when I visit my daughter when she was in school at Gainesville, Florida. It's a great tool. And I encourage people to get on it because I've used it on our streets. And it does a very good job because people are very willing to sit at a stoplight and, while it's red and say, hey, because you can actually have the phone on a stanchion you can get on Amazon, and you have the Waze app up, and it'll ask, it's got a bunch of icons on it, and it tells you traffic delay, and you can hit it. You don't have to text anything, just hit it while you're sitting at a stoplight, and it'll register for everybody else coming to that intersection that's within 3 or 4 miles.
Okay, and that app is WAZE Waze, right?
It is.
Honestly, Patrick, I don't have much experience with that app. I think I downloaded it probably 10 years ago for a trip to Portland, Oregon to see my sister, and I wasn't familiar with the area, and I need as much help as I can get. But when I'm local, I haven't been using it. So I will have to use it in the future, and I will put that app in the show notes on perrysburgpodcast.com. Thanks, Patrick.
Thank you.
Any other tips that you'd like to share as we start to wrap this up?
Not rushing to judgment. I know in the era of the politics and the last election and all the vitriol back and forth, I think we need to understand that people are human beings, that while we all expect not to be judged for mistakes or misstatements or just things that we have to do as public officials, we also have to understand that the things that we do, I've yet in my 39-year career ever woke up, or even knew a council member who woke up in the morning saying, how best can I screw over my residents? I've never had that happen. I truly believe that elected officials, both in Maumee, Perrysburg, Monclova, Toledo, really believe they're doing the best thing for the citizens they represent. And sometimes they have a bit more information at their fingertips based on the traffic studies and so on. I think we have to trust people long term. I think it's easy to incrementally destroy a community, unlike at interventions, even though people think it's an orange barrel, people hate them. But we have the process of fixing the old and bringing them new and change. I tell people, and I said this at the conference yesterday, and when people get really upset about change. And as Peter Drucker is a management guru, and he would say that if we don't become an agent of change, we become a victim of it. And it's so true if you think about that. We fight change so often. We're simply, even as human beings, we're dying every day. And until we do something to change that, we can slow down the inevitable. But our streets decay, our buildings decay, our roofs decay. If we are burying our head in the sand and think that we don't have to change or fix things, we're really barking up the wrong tree, unfortunately. But we need to be kind to people, I think, not just from a government perspective, but also from citizen to neighbor. There's a reason those love your neighbor signs with a heart on them are all over the communities now. Is for a reason. Treat people with respect and kindness.
I think we all need to be curious and have dialogues, just seek to understand instead of being understood. And that's all part of it too.
I've spoken with Citizen Climate Lobby, and I had some meetings with people in Perrysburg, over at Perrysburg at the library during this process. And I do the same thing as I would for anybody. If there's a group of people that would like me to come and talk to them, even if it's just for coffee, 2 or 3 residents, I'll do that. It'll be one resident. They want to know why Maumee did what it did and are more curious after they've read this podcast. I'm sort of rolling down on Saturday, Sunday, evening, morning, doesn't matter, and have coffee with them. I'll come to Perrysburg, have that discussion, and have chat and just have a dialogue. I mean, that's really what it's about. And try to help people understand why we did what we did. And quite frankly, they may have ideas that we hadn't thought of, and that's important as well.
I appreciate that you have an open mind about input from other people, even people that don't live in your own town.
Believe me, I've done this a lot of years, and it's not as if we don't. I mean, there are a lot of people out there, transparency. It's kind of like our ordinances. People believe it's somehow. I first got here, we were doing legislation, 385 ordinances, almost every one of them by emergency. We did this year about 24 ordinances and only half by emergency. That's not typical in other communities. They all do mostly by emergency, still not just mostly, overwhelmingly emergency, like over 90% of their stuff. So we're trying to be more transparent as people think we're not. Because transparency, remember, transparency isn't doing what somebody comes to a meeting says you should do. It's just simply listening and taking people's opinions into account. Doesn't mean you're going to always agree. And I've dealt with that my whole career. My city council members and mayors that I've worked with over the years have always understood that listening is more important than actually doing what people actually say, because you don't know that 100 people in your audience or how everybody feels. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. I think if we approach things in kindness and respect, I think we get far better outcomes on both sides of that aisle.
Agreed. Anything else you'd like to mention as we wrap this up, Patrick?
No, I appreciate doing this. I think it's important. And it's too bad that it took us, 4 months to get together, but that's fine. It's fine.
I think I approached you at a bad time. We started this conversation, just for the audience to know, we started this conversation right around the 4th of July, and this episode will come out on November 29th on Black Friday.
Yes.
Yeah, and the holidays are a great time for this to come out because I think a lot of people are willing to hear each other out and forgive things. It's like around New Year's especially, let old acquaintances be forgot and hopefully bury the hatchet too. I know there's a lot of people that were not happy when the traffic pattern changed, but I also think that a lot of people didn't realize that there were some major road projects that all happened at the same time. Downtown Maumee was doing the road diet. The Anthony Wayne Trail was having construction.
All the way to Choleo too.
Yep, 475 was under construction, and only in hindsight can we sometimes connect the dots. So I hope this episode helps my audience to understand best practices for getting through Maumee and why you did what you did. Patrick, thank you very much for being here on the Perrysburg podcast. Take care.
Appreciate it.
Thanks again to Patrick Burtch for being my guest today on the Perrysburg podcast, episode 71. Just a quick review here, and then I will wrap this one up. The 3 big questions that I had going into this interview were, number 1, why did historic Uptown Maumee change their traffic pattern? Number 2, did the change accomplish their goal? And number 3, what are some best practices for driving through historic Uptown Maumee and accessing businesses during busy times? I got a lot of answers, and I hope you feel like you did too. It doesn't really make the wait time on the bridge to get into town any easier, but at least we have some answers. Here's my recap of the answers. First of all, the left turn lanes help their motorists turn left into the neighborhoods and also provide some access for emergency vehicles. The changes that were made in historic Uptown Maumee improved pedestrian safety, and now there is less semi-traffic and fewer traffic accidents. According to Patrick, they got the outcomes they wanted. So that answers questions 1 and 2. Now for question 3, Patrick's best practices for driving through Uptown Maumee have merit. Adjust the time that you're going to travel by 10 minutes if possible. Give yourself more time and use the Waze app. Now, I know that not everybody can adjust their time of travel or give themselves extra time or use that Waze app. But if you're able to, try to use those suggestions. And kindly share this podcast episode with others so that they at least have the information. I would appreciate it, and thank you. Now, in closing, let's all make good choices and do good things, be patient and kind, and try to remember that the motorists among us are all people just trying to safely get from point A to point B. And that's all I've got for you today. Thank you very much for listening to the Perrysburg Podcast, episode 71. To read the show notes, go to perrysburgpodcast.com. In the show notes, you will find links to the Waze app, the City of Maumee, the Ohio Department of Transportation, or ODOT's, social media channels, and more. If you would like to be notified by email about each new episode of the Perrysburg Podcast, sign up for our newsletter on perrysburgpodcast.com. I will email you every week when a new episode comes out. You can also get out your smartphone right now and subscribe to or follow the Perrysburg Podcast on your favorite podcast player and YouTube to get each new episode right when it comes out. Share this episode with anyone you think might enjoy it. I thank you for listening today. I will talk to you next Friday.